Mom?
Hey. Here's
Oh
what
my
I'm supposed
goodness.
to say. I know, Kenzie, listen, these phone calls are recorded. We are not allowed to talk about anything. I don't know if it matters or means anything, but we're just never going to stop, okay?
I'm not saying I'm innocent. I was a driver of a tragedy.
It was on this app. Davion was on his phone at 5:35.
Okay.
And it says that they crashed at 5:36.
Before that, they went to a little gathering or party or
Graduation party.
Yeah.
They might have been on psychedelics.
Hearing an awful lot about your daughter. I'm not hearing very much about the two dead people.
Dominic, okay, I'm asking you for leniency because this was a tragic accident that she does not remember. And Davion, he's a new friend. And I'm so sorry.
What does that mean? His life is worthless?
No.
Case 1, Mackenzie Sharilla. At 5:30 in the morning on July 31st, 2022, a Toyota Camry traveling down Progress Road in Strongsville, Ohio, struck the exterior wall of a commercial building. The vehicle was moving at 100 miles per hour. The driver's foot was fully on the accelerator. The brake was never touched. Not once. The two passengers, 20-year-old Dominic Russo and 19-year-old Davion Flanagan, were pronounced dead at the scene. The driver, 17-year-old Mackenzie Sharilla, survived. That is where this case begins. Strongsville is a suburb of Cleveland in Cuyahoga County. When law enforcement first arrived, the working theory was a traffic accident. Young driver. Early morning hours. Possible impairment. Standard assumptions for a standard response. The evidence did not cooperate with that theory. The first major turning point came when investigators recovered and analyzed the vehicle's event data recorder, the EDR, commonly called the black box. This device, embedded in modern vehicles, captures real-time data in the seconds before a collision, vehicle speed, throttle position, brake pedal engagement, and steering input. The EDR data from Sharilla's Toyota Camry showed one clear picture. In the final seconds before impact, the accelerator pedal was pressed to its full extent. The brake pedal was not engaged at any point. The vehicle had no mechanical defects that contributed to the crash. Investigators also reviewed surveillance camera footage from the Progress Road corridor. That footage showed the vehicle's acceleration path and trajectory in the seconds leading up to impact. The footage was subsequently played in court as primary evidence. A forensic examination of the scene established no signs of evasive action. Toxicology testing confirmed that psilocybin mushrooms and a digital scale were located on Sharilla at the time of her arrest. Cuyahoga County prosecutors built their case around a core argument that the crash was not an accident, not a mechanical failure, and not the result of recklessness. They argued the crash was intentional, and that Sharilla had deliberately driven the vehicle into the wall with the two passengers inside. Central to that argument was the relationship between Sharilla and Russo. Prosecutors presented evidence at trial characterizing the relationship as one marked by documented conflict and instability. They argued that this context, combined with the EDR data and the surveillance footage, established that the act was premeditated. Sharilla was charged as an adult under Ohio law. By the time her case went to trial in the summer of 2023, she was 19 years old. The case was prosecuted by the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office under Prosecutor Michael O'Malley, and it was assigned to Cuyahoga County Common Pleas Court Judge Nancy Margaret Russo as a bench trial, meaning the verdict would be delivered by the judge alone, without a jury. Sharilla did not testify during the trial. Her defense attorneys argued that the prosecution's evidence was insufficient to establish intent, that the crash was consistent with a loss of vehicle control rather than a deliberate act. The defense did not contest the EDR data itself. The argument was about interpretation. Judge Nancy Margaret Russo was not persuaded. On August 14, 2023, she returned a verdict of guilty on 12 counts. For counts of murder, for counts of felonious assault, 2 counts of aggravated vehicular homicide, 1 count of drug possession, and 1 count of possessing criminal tools. In her ruling, Judge Russo stated that the evidence showed the crash was controlled, methodical, deliberate, intentional, and purposeful. She added, "This was not reckless driving. This was murder." 1 week later, on August 21, 2023, Sharilla was sentenced to 2 concurrent terms of 15 years to life in prison. Her driver's license was suspended for life. Her earliest possible parole hearing is scheduled for September 2037. At sentencing, Sharilla addressed the victims' families directly. She said, "I'm so deeply sorry. I would never let this happen or do it on purpose. I wish I could remember what happened. I'm so sorry." Prosecutor O'Malley stated that it was his hope Sharilla would come out of prison a better person and spend the rest of her life doing good in our community. The conviction was appealed 3 times. In September 2024, the Ohio 8th District Court of Appeals affirmed the conviction after reviewing defense arguments about insufficient evidence and alleged clerical errors. In early 2025, the legal team filed a further appeal with the Ohio Supreme Court. In April 2025, the Supreme Court declined to hear the case. In March 2026, the 8th District Court of Appeals again upheld the trial court's decision, ruling additionally that the most recent appeal had been filed 1 day past the 365-day jurisdictional deadline. As of the recording of this documentary, Mackenzie Sharilla is incarcerated at the Ohio Reformatory for Women in Marysville, Ohio. Her parents have publicly maintained their belief in her innocence and state they remain in daily contact with her. She will not be eligible for parole until 2037 at the earliest. The Sharilla case stands as one of the clearest examples of forensic event data recorder evidence being used to successfully support an intentional murder charge in a motor vehicle case. The black box did not speculate. It recorded, and the court found that recording sufficient to establish guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Case 2. Emil Weaver. On April 22, 2015, 2 students at Muskingum University in New Concord, Ohio, discovered a plastic trash bag outside their sorority house. Inside the bag, they found the body of a newborn infant girl. They called law enforcement immediately. Muskingum University is a small private institution in Muskingum County in eastern Ohio. The sorority house belonged to the Delta Gamma Theta chapter on campus. Within hours of the discovery, investigators had identified a suspect, 20-year-old Emil Weaver, a student at the university and a member of the sorority. Forensic testing confirmed the biological relationship between Weaver and the infant. A medical examiner's review established that the infant had been born alive. Prosecutors would argue at trial, based on forensic pathology evidence, that the child died as a result of being placed inside a sealed plastic bag. Weaver was from Clarington, Ohio. She was 20 years old at the time of the events, meaning she was a legal adult and not subject to juvenile court proceedings. Investigators documented a number of details that became central to the prosecution's case at trial. In the hours following the birth, those around Weaver reported no indication that anything unusual had occurred. No sorority members described any awareness of a birth. This observation formed part of the prosecution's argument regarding Weaver's state of awareness during the events of that day. Investigators also recovered text message communications from Weaver's device. Prosecutors presented, as trial evidence, a message Weaver sent to a man she believed to be the infant's father. The message read, "No more baby," followed by "taken care of." The sentencing judge later cited these communications specifically in his remarks. Prosecutors argued that Weaver had known she was pregnant throughout the full term of the pregnancy. They introduced evidence that she had researched and scheduled an abortion but did not follow through with the appointment. They argued that this demonstrated deliberate decision-making and a sustained effort to conceal the pregnancy rather than pursue available alternatives. Ohio's safe haven statute was referenced directly by prosecutors. That law allows any parent to leave a newborn infant at any hospital, police station, or fire station in Ohio without legal consequence. Prosecutors emphasized that this option had been available and that Weaver had not used it. The prosecution also presented evidence of activities Weaver engaged in during the pregnancy that were characterized as inconsistent with an unplanned or unknown pregnancy. Weaver was indicted on 1 count of aggravated murder, 1 count of abuse of a corpse, and 2 counts of tampering with evidence. She pleaded not guilty to all charges. At trial, Weaver testified on her own behalf. She stated that she had been in denial about the pregnancy and that she believed the infant was already deceased when she placed her in the bag. She apologized in court. The jury reviewed the full evidentiary record and in June 2016 returned a verdict of guilty on all 4 counts. At sentencing in July 2016, Muskingum County Common Pleas Court Judge Mark Flegel sentenced Weaver to life in prison without the possibility of parole for aggravated murder, with 4 concurrent years on the remaining counts. Judge Flegel stated he was not convinced by representations of remorse and referenced the text message evidence as particularly significant to his sentencing determination. Following conviction, Weaver's legal team pursued multiple avenues of appeal. In 2017, the 5th District Court of Appeals upheld the conviction. That same year, Weaver filed a petition for post-conviction relief, arguing that her trial attorney had failed to adequately explain and contextualize the medical and psychiatric condition known as neonaticide during the sentencing hearing. Neonaticide is defined in the legal record as the causing of a newborn's death within 24 hours of birth. Forensic psychiatric literature recognizes it as a distinct behavioral category, typically associated with acute psychological distress, denial of pregnancy, and decision-making under extreme panic. Weaver's petition included a forensic expert report stating she fit the recognized profile associated with this condition. Judge Flegel, presiding over the post-conviction hearing as well, denied the petition and discredited the expert witness testimony. An appellate court initially upheld that denial. In December 2022, the Ohio Supreme Court issued a 4-3 decision in Weaver's favor, not on the conviction, but on the sentencing. The majority opinion, authored by Chief Justice Maureen O'Connor, held that Weaver had received ineffective assistance of counsel during her sentencing hearing. The majority found that her attorney had provided only a brief and decontextualized reference to neonaticide without explaining its potential mitigating significance. The court further found that Judge Flegel had demonstrated an unreasonable attitude toward the neonaticide evidence and toward expert testimony regarding a related condition called pregnancy negation syndrome. The court ordered a new sentencing hearing before a different judge, one in which the neonaticide evidence could be properly presented. The court specified that at resentencing, Weaver would be eligible for consideration of a life sentence with parole eligibility after 20 years, rather than automatic life without parole. The conviction itself was not disturbed. All 4 guilty verdicts remained in place. As of the recording of this documentary, Emil Weaver, listed in Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction records under inmate number W095801, remains incarcerated at the Ohio Reformatory for Women in Marysville, Ohio, where she has been held since her admission date of July 8, 2016. The resentencing proceeding ordered by the Ohio Supreme Court remains part of the ongoing legal record of the case. The infant, named Addison Grace Weaver in court documents, was identified by name in the legal record and received a funeral attended by members of the New Concord community. The Weaver case produced one of the more consequential Ohio Supreme Court rulings on sentencing standards in recent years. It did not change whether she is guilty. It changed the legal standard for how fully a court must consider medical evidence before determining how long she will remain incarcerated. Case 3. Alexis Martin. On the evening of November 7, 2013, Akron police responded to a residence on the city's north side. When officers arrived, they found the scene of a robbery. Angelo Kearney, 36 years old, was dead from a gunshot wound. A second man, Alicio Samuel, had sustained a non-fatal wound. Multiple individuals were taken into custody before the night ended. One of them was a 15-year-old girl named Alexis Martin. The investigation established the following sequence of events, as reflected in court documents and subsequent guilty plea records. In the period leading up to November 7th, Martin collaborated with 3 adults, a second female, and 2 men, in planning a robbery of the Kearney residence. According to court records, the plan involved Martin and the second female using distraction while the 2 armed male co-defendants entered to commit the robbery. Kearney was shot and killed in the course of the incident. Samuel was wounded. Martin was not accused of discharging a weapon. She was not in the room where the shooting occurred at the time it took place. Under Ohio law, complicity in a criminal act that results in a death can support a murder charge regardless of whether the individual personally caused the death. Martin was charged with aggravated murder and additional counts. The Summit County Prosecutor's Office moved to transfer her case from juvenile court to adult court. What followed was not a simple transfer. It became one of the most significant legal proceedings in Ohio juvenile justice in recent years because of a legal question that should have been asked before the transfer was ever made. At the time of the crime, Ohio had enacted a safe harbor statute, codified at RC 2152.021F, specifically designed to protect juveniles who had been victims of human trafficking from being prosecuted as adults for crimes connected to their victimization. If a juvenile court had reason to believe a young person was a trafficking victim and that the alleged offenses were related to that victimization, additional procedural protections were required before any transfer to adult court could take place. Central among those protections was the mandatory appointment of a guardian ad litem, an independent advocate for the child, who would investigate the full background and make a recommendation to the court. A forensic evaluation submitted during the proceedings stated that Kearney had trafficked Martin from approximately the age of 14. According to that evaluation, Kearney had compelled her participation in commercial sex acts, required her to work at adult entertainment venues, and exercise control over her movements and finances. The Summit County Juvenile Court judge transferred Martin's case to adult court. No guardian ad litem was appointed before that transfer occurred. In adult court, Martin entered a guilty plea to aggravated murder and 1 count of felonious assault. She was 17 years old at sentencing. She was sentenced to 21 years to life in prison. She began serving that sentence at the Ohio Reformatory for Women. Her legal team appealed on the safe harbor argument, contending that the juvenile court had failed to apply the statutory protections required by Ohio law before transferring her case. In August 2018, the Ohio Supreme Court issued a 6-1 ruling upholding Martin's conviction. The majority opinion, authored by Justice Judith L. French, held that for the safe harbor protections to apply, Martin would have needed to demonstrate that her offenses were directly related to her victimization, and that the evidence did not establish she had been compelled or coerced into the robbery, or that she participated in order to free herself from Kearney's control. The lone dissenting justice took the position that a robbery targeting a sex trafficker by a 15-year-old that trafficker was currently controlling was by its nature related to her victimization. That dissent did not change the outcome. The conviction stood. Martin's case subsequently attracted national attention as an example of the tension between trafficking survivor status and criminal accountability under the law. In 2020, Ohio Governor Mike DeWine announced the partial commutation of her sentence as part of a group of 7 inmate releases connected to the state's response to the coronavirus pandemic. DeWine called her case of particular interest and cited her trafficking survivor status. Under the commutation terms, she was released on strict parole conditions, including an ankle monitoring device and mandatory random parole inspections. During her years of incarceration prior to release, Martin had earned her GED, become a certified dog trainer, and organized a support group for other incarcerated survivors of trafficking. Her release was not permanent. In 2022, Martin was reincarcerated following a parole violation identified during a random inspection. The Ohio Parole Board reinstated her original 21 years to life sentence in full. Under the reinstated sentence, Martin's next eligible parole hearing is scheduled for November 2034, the point at which the minimum 21-year term of her original sentence will have been served. As of the recording of this documentary, Alexis Martin is serving her sentence within the Ohio correctional system. The Martin case remains one of the most cited examples in academic and policy discussions about the intersection of juvenile trafficking victim protections and criminal accountability. The Ohio Supreme Court defined the evidentiary threshold for the safe harbor statute's application. The dissent documented what one justice viewed as the statute's failure to operate as intended. Both positions are now part of Ohio's permanent legal record. Case 4, Brittany Pilkington. She was 9 years old when Joseph Pilkington moved into her home. He came in as her mother's boyfriend. He took her to school appointments. He signed documents at Bellefontaine City Schools on her behalf. For years, according to court records, he held himself out to the world as her father. By the time Brittany Pilkington was 17 years old, Joseph Pilkington had impregnated her. That is where this case begins. Not in 2015, when 3 children were dead and Ohio was watching, but years earlier, in a Logan County household where the systems that existed to protect a child either looked away, failed to act, or were never properly engaged at all. To understand the full record of this case, you have to understand both proceedings, what was done to her as a teenager, and what she later did as an adult. Both are part of the permanent court record of Logan County, Ohio. Bellefontaine is the county seat of Logan County in western Ohio, approximately 60 miles northwest of Columbus. In 2015, it became the center of one of the most closely followed criminal cases in the state. But the legal record of this case begins in 2009. A Logan County grand jury indictment established the following facts. Joseph Pilkington, then 43 years old, had resided in the home of Brittany Pilkington's biological mother since Brittany was approximately 7 years old. Over those years, he assumed what the indictment formally described as a dominant parental role in the household. He attended her medical appointments. He signed school documents on her behalf. He provided shelter, food, and financial support. He functioned in every documentable way as a parental figure. In 2009, when Brittany was 17, Joseph Pilkington initiated a sexual relationship with her, and she became pregnant. Brittany's biological father later told investigators that he and his wife had contacted Children's Services when Brittany was approximately 12 years old, reporting their concerns about the household. According to their account, no action was taken. Logan County authorities were also made aware of the relationship at the time Brittany became pregnant at 17. At that time, prosecutors declined to file charges. Brittany Pilkington gave birth, married Joseph Pilkington, and went on to have 3 sons with him over the following years. In August of 2015, Bellefontaine police responded to a call from the Pilkington residence. 3-month-old Noah Pilkington was found unresponsive and died. On that same day, Brittany Pilkington gave a recorded confession to law enforcement. She stated that she had also caused the deaths of 4-year-old Gavin, who died in April of 2015, and 3-month-old Neil, who died in July of 2014. 3 children, 3 deaths, 13 months. Brittany Pilkington was 23 years old at the time of her arrest. She was charged with 3 counts of aggravated murder, charges that carried the possibility of a death sentence under Ohio law. She pleaded not guilty and was held in Logan County Jail on $1 million bond. In September of 2015, 1 month after Brittany's arrest, Joseph Pilkington was charged with felony sexual battery for his conduct with Brittany when she was 17. In 2016, he entered a guilty plea to the reduced misdemeanor charge of sexual imposition. He avoided jail time and was required to register as a convicted sex offender annually for 15 years. Joseph Pilkington was never a suspect in the deaths of his 3 sons. Brittany Pilkington's case moved through the Logan County court system for 4 years. Her defense team, led by attorney Court Gatterdam, presented significant mitigating evidence. Medical scanning identified damage in Pilkington's right frontal lobe, an area associated with impulse control, decision-making, and emotional regulation. Defense experts attributed that damage to childhood lead poisoning and to the documented neurological effects of sustained physical and sexual abuse beginning in childhood. Neuropsychological assessments documented developmental delays and emotional deficits. One of the state's own expert witnesses advised prosecutors that the death penalty was not appropriate in this case specifically because of Pilkington's documented mental deficits and neurological condition. Prosecutors accepted that recommendation and did not seek the death penalty. At sentencing, Gatterdam addressed the court directly. He said, "Imagine being developmentally delayed, but neither the parents, schools, or social agencies helped you. Then your mother brings this person into your life who started interacting with you at age 9. It does not excuse her conduct, but by God, it does explain it." In November of 2019, Brittany Pilkington entered a guilty plea in Logan County Common Pleas Court to 2 counts of murder and 1 count of involuntary manslaughter. The plea agreement removed the death penalty from the table. The murder charge related to the first child, infant Neil, was reduced to involuntary manslaughter after a judge ruled that a portion of her original confession relating to that death was inadmissible. Logan County Common Pleas Court Judge Mark Connor sentenced Pilkington to 15 years to life on each murder count and 7 years on the involuntary manslaughter count, all ordered to run consecutively. Total sentence, 37 years to life. Logan County Prosecutor Eric Stewart stated at sentencing, "No sentence will reflect what she has done. The 3 children, Neil, Gavin, and Noah, each died under the age of 5. That is the factual record of what happened to them. The investigation and proceedings that followed are documented above." The Pilkington case sits at the intersection of two separate failures. The first was the failure of multiple agencies, children's services, school systems, and county prosecutors, to intervene when Brittany was a child and a teenager in a household where, by her own family's account and later confirmed by a criminal indictment, she was being exploited by an adult in a position of parental authority. The second failure is the one the criminal court addressed directly: the deaths of 3 children in Logan County between 2014 and 2015. Both failures are documented. Both are part of the permanent public record of the state of Ohio. As of the recording of this documentary, Brittany Pilkington is incarcerated at the Ohio Reformatory for Women in Marysville, Ohio. She will not be eligible for parole consideration for 37 years from the date of her November 2019 sentencing. Her surviving daughter is being raised by extended family in Logan County. Case 5, Janiah Page. 2 13-year-old girls left school together on April 19, 2021, in Cincinnati, Ohio. They had been best friends for years. By 9 o'clock that same night, one of them was dead. The other was in police custody, charged with murder. Hamilton County is home to Cincinnati, the state's third largest city. In October of 2022, a case out of its juvenile court produced a guilty verdict that divided the community and raised hard questions about how Ohio's legal system handles accountability when the defendant is 13 years old. The investigation began when Cincinnati Police Department officers responded to a call on Topridge Place in the Winton Hills neighborhood at approximately 9 in the evening. Officers arrived to find 13-year-old Naira Givens with a stab wound to the right side of her neck. First responders transported her to Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center, where she died from her injuries that same night. Court documents established that Naira and the defendant, also 13, identified in court records as Janiah Page, had been close friends for several years and attended Aiken High School together within Cincinnati Public Schools. According to Hamilton County Juvenile Court Judge Carrie Bloom's written decision, the conflict began on the Metro bus ride home from school that afternoon. On that bus, Naira heard a personal secret about herself being discussed by another girl. Naira had originally shared that secret with Page and believed Page had passed it on to others. After arriving home, Naira and 2 cousins went directly to Page's residence. They recorded themselves making threats outside Page's home while Page's mother stood in the doorway. The group then left. Later that evening, around 8:30, Naira spotted Page standing outside while riding in a vehicle with her brother and cousins. Naira exited the vehicle and approached Page on foot. A physical confrontation followed. Page drew a pocket knife and stabbed Naira in the neck. Page then ran inside her home. Naira was driven back to her residence where adults called 911. Naira Givens, 13 years old, died that night at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. Page was charged with 2 counts of murder and 1 count of felonious assault. The case remained in Hamilton County Juvenile Court. Page was held in custody throughout the proceedings. The case was assigned to Judge Carrie Bloom, who had taken the bench in February of 2021, 2 months before the events on Topridge Place. In October of 2022, 18 months after Naira's death, Judge Bloom issued her verdict. Page was found guilty of murder and felonious assault. Judge Bloom delivered her decision in a 5-page written ruling. In that ruling, Bloom noted that both girls had a prior documented history of physical conflict. She found that Naira had gone to Page's home that afternoon, recorded herself making threatening statements outside, and returned a second time that same evening to confront Page. The most legally significant element of Judge Bloom's written decision was her finding on intent. She determined that the evidence did not establish that Page's specific intent at the moment of the confrontation was to cause Naira's death. The court found that Page intended to fight and cause physical harm, consistent with the history between the two, but not that she went outside that evening with the deliberate purpose of causing a death. Under Ohio law, specific intent is a required element for certain homicide classifications. Judge Bloom drew a legal distinction between an act that results in death and a premeditated act designed to produce death. The murder conviction stood, but that intent finding would carry direct weight at sentencing. Page appeared for sentencing in December of 2022. She was 15 years old. Under Ohio juvenile law, The maximum sentence available at that stage was commitment to the Ohio Department of Youth Services until her 21st birthday, approximately 6 years from the sentencing date. Judge Bloom did not impose that sentence. She suspended it. Page was placed on official probation and assigned to a lockdown residential placement facility instead of a secure Department of Youth Services institution. The court order made clear that the suspended sentence remained fully active. If Page violated any conditions of her probation or failed to comply with the terms of her placement, the original commitment could be reinstated immediately, and she would be held in a secure juvenile facility until age 21. The decision drew an immediate response from Naira's family. Her cousin Missy Red stated publicly, "My family did not get justice. Now we have to worry about seeing this girl out. We can see her at the store or anywhere." The court issued a statement explaining that Judge Bloom was prohibited by judicial ethics from publicly commenting on pending cases. Since Page remained on active probation and the matter was still open before the court, no further comment could be provided. The Page case places 3 hard questions directly in front of Ohio's juvenile justice system. The first is what a murder conviction means when the defendant is 13. The verdict was clear. The legal process was completed in full. The guilty finding is part of the permanent record of Hamilton County. The second is what accountability looks like at that age. Ohio's juvenile system is designed by legislative intent to prioritize rehabilitation. A suspended sentence with probation placement rather than secure detention is not a malfunction of the system. It is the system working as Ohio's legislature built it to work. The third is the question Naira's family raised publicly and that no court ruling can fully resolve: whether that outcome delivers what the law defines as justice and what a grieving family recognizes as accountability. Judge Bloom's written decision produced one answer. Naira Given's family received a different one. Both are permanently recorded in the public record of Hamilton County Juvenile Court, Cincinnati, Ohio. Naira Givens was 13 years old. She died on April 19, 2021. 5 cases, 5 defendants, 5 different paths through the Ohio justice system. Mackenzie Shirilla, convicted of murder on forensic data from a vehicle's black box. Sentenced to 15 years to life. Currently incarcerated at the Ohio Reformatory for Women. Emil Weaver, convicted of aggravated murder after a jury trial. The conviction stands. The sentencing is under review following an Ohio Supreme Court ruling on ineffective assistance of counsel. Currently incarcerated at the Ohio Reformatory for Women. Alexis Martin, convicted of aggravated murder as an adult after a juvenile court transfer that the Ohio Supreme Court later found procedurally flawed but not outcome determinative. Released on commuted sentence. Reincarcerated after a parole violation. Next parole hearing, 2034. The Hamilton defendant, adjudicated in juvenile court on a murder charge. Sentenced to commitment to the Ohio Department of Youth Services until age 21. Identity protected under Ohio juvenile privacy law. To accountability. That is the record. That is cold justice. If you made it to the end, thank you. Drop a like on this video if you found it valuable. Leave a comment below telling us which case raised the most questions for you. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a cold justice episode. Until next time.